Hey, and welcome back to Game Talk. I'm your host, Ahmed Mion. Today I'm joined by Connor
Hey guys.
and Mike.
Hello.
And we took a little tiny break, but now we're back, and it is one day before the release date of Paper Mario, The Origami King, and Ghost of Tsushima. And I bring this up because specifically reviews for Paper Mario came in, and it's just, I feel like Nintendo, they really don't want to make an older style Paper Mario. Like, I think we just have to accept that. And I think the sooner we do that as fans, we can move on. Because while the reviews for Origami King are sort of mixed, they do say that, like, yeah, some older elements come back, but like, it's not really fleshed out in the way they were before, and like the new stuff really takes precedence. So like, there's no XP in the combat, which like totally defeats the purpose of turn-based combat to me. Like, you don't level up or gain skills, so what's the point of fighting? So once I heard about that, that was like a huge turnoff for me. But like, the game still looks charming enough that I still want to play it, but it's just like, I was really banking on this being like a return to form for Paper Mario, but it really doesn't look like it is.
See, that's kind of funny because to me, not having XP from the fights means that I'm not going to be punished when I avoid them like the plague, like I do in every turn-based RPG. So that's like
Yeah.
exciting to me.
Yeah, I don't know. I was just really yearning for those RPG elements that
Yeah.
Nintendo clearly has no interest in. But yeah, I just wanted to air that grievance. But also, Ghost of Tsushima comes out tomorrow, and I'm pretty excited for that.
Yeah, I heard that's reviewed really well, at least in Japan.
Yeah, Famitsu gave it a perfect score, but then again, I don't really give much credence to Famitsu these days. So, but like, I don't know, it's gotten respectable reviews. It's like in the mid 80s on Metacritic, which is really good. So, and I'm always down for an Assassin's Creed Japan type game. So, that's exciting. But yeah, I think the main thing we wanted to talk about today was something we briefly brought up in our last episode was the popular notion that like video games are bad for you, specifically for children, and how that's pretty much provably false. And I just kind of wanted to get into that. I think that's an important talk to have, and I think Connor, you have some strong feelings on this, so why don't you start?
Yeah, so I'm probably what I'm going to say here isn't necessarily all original to me, so I want to credit a YouTube channel called Psych of Play. And it's a good channel. You guys should check it out for sure. And if you like this podcast, you're gonna like the sort of stuff they talk about. But I want to lay down a bit of groundwork here because I personally think that playing video games is good for you in an educational sense. But I want to say what I don't mean there, and I do not mean educational games because I have never really. I think I played a game that taught me how to type as a kid, and that is the only time I've ever seen an educational game that was actually like good for little kids.
Right.
Like,
And
Yeah.
go ahead.
it just doesn't typically. It never really hit for me. I guess it always seemed like everything was like too spelled out for you, kind of, and that kind of goes into what I want to say. I'm also not saying that like playing Call of Duty is good for you. That is not the kind of game I'm talking about. There might be a hand-eye coordination element there,
Yeah.
but it's not better than what going outside and throwing a ball is going to get you. I don't think. But there are games that do teach you things that maybe you wouldn't typically learn in a school setting or necessarily even out hanging with your friends and stuff.
I think for me at least, the most important thing games teach you is like problem solving skills.
Yeah. There's also a lot of games that inspire further learning. Like,
Right. Yeah,
me playing
you talked
Elite-
about a lot of these strategy games that have led you to learn more about history, right, Mike?
yeah, no, I'm a history nut because of strategy games.
Right.
Yep.
I'm more the side I take is more into what Ahmed was saying, whereas school tends to be very strict on giving you a tool set and then putting you into what's called convergent thinking, which is when you have a couple of solutions and you're narrowing them down, or a couple of tools in your belt to get a solution, and you narrow it down to the correct one and use that. So like you have multiple answers and you try to figure out which one is correct. That's what's known as convergent thinking. And that's pretty much what all schooling is focused on, it seems like to me. Like even through a lot of college, that was all that we really thought about, which totally ignores an incredibly important thing called divergent thinking, which is where you see a problem and you don't have any tools yet, and you have to just come up with possible solutions.
Yeah.
And games like what comes to my mind is Breath of the Wild.
I was thinking the exact same thing. Yeah.
That teaches divergent thinking better than probably anything else I've ever, outside of like being in the woods and like coming up with a fun thing to do with my friends and trying to figure out how to do it. Breath of the Wild has taught that better than anything else. Which is funny because a lot of Zelda games definitely lean into convergent thinking as well. But Breath of the Wild in particular, I think is extremely good for teaching a problem-solving hole that a lot of people have.
Yeah, and I think Breath of the Wild is indeed the best example of being a teacher in that sense. But I think many games really sort of teach you to think creatively and outside of the box and critically faster than you would just, that's not really a skill you could pick up by studying, I think. Like,
I can only speak for the American school system, but a lot of it these days is regurgitation and stuff. It's not a lot of critical thinking a lot of the time. It's more knowing, exactly what to do in a given scenario and doing it.
Yeah,
exactly. Go ahead, Mike.
Now don't know critical thinking because it's something you can't teach. It's something you have to figure out on your own.
Right.
It's really
It's
hard
not something
to teach.
You don't teach it as much as put someone in a situation where they have to learn it, which is what these games do.
Yeah, and I really enjoy the angle that Mike brought up, like being a gateway to discovering more knowledge. I never even really thought about it that way, but I think the way I really think about games is that obviously Call of Duty and those twitchy sort of games are teach you a sort of different skill set, right? Like reaction time and stuff like that. But what I'm talking about is maybe 3D action adventure games, for example. I think a lot of those have a lot of instances where there's dungeons or puzzles to solve or something like that. And a lot of those levels really sort of encourage experimentation and trying and seeing what works and what doesn't work and learning that, okay, it's okay to try something and fail if it means that it'll help inform the correct decision sooner. And I think that's a super important life skill to have and something that not a lot of people are comfortable with, failure.
Yeah.
But I think especially let's say Dark Souls, for instance, right? I know that's kind of an extreme example, but you fail a lot in Dark Souls. And that turns off a lot of people. And I think that's perfectly normal. But I think if you stick through it, it really kind of teaches you tenacity and finding ways to get around your problems and not giving up until you succeed.
Yeah, I'm kind of trying to avoid more mature games like Dark Souls in the discussion because I am thinking more younger kids personally. Yeah. But yeah. I mean, that's a good point. And, Dark Souls isn't the only game, Mega Man, same, you're going to die a bunch. You got to learn. Although I wouldn't necessarily say that Mega Man is super good for you. It's actually hard. I can't imagine being a parent. Obviously we're making the argument that games are good for you, but not that all games are good for you. And I think it would be extremely difficult for a parent who is not what I would call video game literate to be able to tell the difference.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think it's important to draw the distinction that the problems with video games are problems that exist in all other forms of media. Of course you shouldn't let your kid sit for 8 hours a day in front of the console and then argue that video games are bad, right? That's obvious. Your kid shouldn't be doing 8 hours of anything a day. Similar to, well, yeah, you got me there. But similarly, the arguments for violence, we might as well get into that too. That argument is very inane, I think, because okay, you won't let your kid play video games because they're violent. That's on you as the parent to, guide your kid to digest the content that's most appropriate for them, corresponding to their age. And that includes movies, books, shows, and games, right? You can't argue the video games are a violent argument, because then the same thing applies to any form of media, like you just have to present it to your kid when they're ready.
Right. I also think that I don't know if this is really true anymore, but when I was growing up, I felt like I was a stronger reader than a lot of kids in my class when I was very young, largely because I was really interested in learning how to read because my video games were so confusing to me when I wasn't able to read.
Young Connor had to figure out how to read because he did not understand.
Wind Waker was very difficult to a child who can't read.
It was super difficult to a child, and I'm showing my relative age compared to Connor. Ocarina of Time.
Yeah, I imagine that would be tough if you can't read.
Forest Temple, and you're like, what do I do?
Yeah.
People don't talk about the Water Temple, but then they don't talk about the Forest Temple and how big of a maze that one is.
Yeah. And there's little stuff that games can teach you too that you don't necessarily pick up, like spatial reasoning. Being less like Minecraft definitely made me less likely to get lost in general.
Oh yeah. Minecraft is definitely a huge educational tool.
You see, Minecraft's weird because a lot of people want to say that it could be turned into an educational game, and I don't really think that's true. I think all the educational value Minecraft is gonna have, it already has. And that's just pure creativity, experimentation, self-expression. Maybe not necessarily educational, all those things, but good for you in general.
No, I mean it's educational, just not educational in the traditional sense, right? You're not learning about math or chemistry or whatever, right? But you're learning creative thinking skills, and that's again something that's not really taught in American schools and something that's really valuable. And I guess an argument could be made for Minecraft. It could teach programming,
it
logic.
Does. Yeah, the Redstone is definitely valuable. It definitely exposes kids to binary logic a lot younger than they normally before college essentially.
Yeah, and I think
that's huge.
Yeah, that really is huge. If that way of thinking gets ingrained at you when you're 7 or 8, that will pay huge dividends for you later on in life.
There are a lot of games that Roblox exposed me.
I was going to mention Roblox. Roblox taught me only one thing, and that's not to say swears over the internet because the mods will get angry.
Yeah, Roblox was probably my first exposure to programming. I wanted to make levels in Lua, and I was copying and pasting other people's stuff, but trying to get it to work.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I remember a lot of trying to get things to work in Roblox. It never just worked.
And obviously, in the age of coronavirus that we're in right now, I would say that video games are extremely important as a social platform, although, I think kids should either be supervised or above a certain age to be on those social platforms.
Yeah, that's an area that I don't think has an easy answer because I think if you have a if you have a Minecraft realm that your kid and your kid's friends play on, I think that's super good. Right. They're getting to hang with their friends and right. But I'm talking about unfiltered online interaction that can almost, I think, all of the time. It's like the Wild West.
It's a little nasty.
It's very vile. So I think if you're making the argument, okay, video games aren't good for kids because of that, I feel like that's pretty valid. But then
but the unfiltered Wild West of online is where I learned how to be a good person.
See, okay, so that's great that happened
or
with
be
you,
toxic.
But I feel like
it's to be toxic, but don't be toxic to people's faces. Just complain about them on stream.
I was playing Sea of Thieves with randoms not too long ago, and I remember I was with a group of middle school and high schoolers, and I just wanted to finish what we'd started, so I just shut up and sat through it. But they, for some reason, thought it was hilarious to say, and this is verbatim what they were saying, trans people exist, was what they found so hilarious to say.
So, kids are just stupid, that's a so irrefutable stupid fact, and I'm sure I said stupid stuff, not exactly like that, but stuff that really doesn't make any, why would anyone even say something like that,
Oh no, I said some stupid things when I was younger.
But I guess what I'm getting at is the fear is that kids absorb things really quickly, be that
Yeah.
positive or negative, right? So if they're constantly getting like an 8-year-old's constantly like getting a filter of like obscenities, that's like what they're going to say. And that's obviously not cool.
Look at
Yeah,
me.
and I remember when I was in like middle school, my parents didn't want me to play some game online or something. I think I wanted to play Call of Duty or something, and my parents didn't want me, exposed to what
Yeah.
people said online. My argument was always that I hear worse at middle school.
Yeah,
And I
that's
believed
always
that
the
at the
argument.
time. But I'm not actually looking back, I'm not sure that was true.
Well, so like, I have a cousin who's like around 10 years old, right? I think he was 10 when he asked his dad, or he might have actually been 9. When he asked his dad to play Call of Duty like online.
Yeah.
And like obviously, so like his dad doesn't really know much about video games, so he called me and I talked to him and I was just like, look, he can play, but like just know like when you're online, there's like no sort of filter. Like he would have to mute everyone manually.
Yeah, I really think it's a per kid basis. Like, my parents didn't let me. I think it was when I turned 14 I was allowed to play like rated M games, and
Yeah.
I kind of, looking back, I think my mom was just not, like, I was a fairly mature kid. My mom was not super educated about stuff, but I've definitely met kids that are that young who probably shouldn't. I definitely, the blanket rated M game, I kind of don't always agree with the ESRB, because like putting Call of Duty in the same vein as Grand Theft Auto doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, I think so.
Because Grand Theft Auto, while you're shooting people in both, shooting people is not a blanket level of violence, Like Grand Theft Auto, shooting someone in Grand Theft Auto is far more violent than shooting someone in Call of Duty. Because Call of Duty is like, you're in a fight, it's a competition, whereas you're playing Grand Theft Auto, you're probably shooting innocent people. And like,
and Call of Duty is a per game basis on how violent it could be.
yeah, that's true as well. And definitely Call of Duty, the campaigns I'm not super familiar with, but I understand they can get pretty graphic as well.
Yeah, the campaigns are definitely more violent than the multiplayer. I will say that for sure.
Yeah, I was very thankful. The shooter I was familiar with as a kid was Roblox, and I was very grateful to have it.
Yeah, as a kid, like the shooter I was primarily into was Halo, right? So Halo,
Right. And I wouldn't call Halo particularly violent.
yeah, it's.
Like,
I mean, there's guns and there's shooting, but there's no gore.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
Halo was good.
yeah, and also Fortnite. I think Fortnite overall, although I have my own issues with Fortnite, but like, if your kid's not spending a ton of money in it, and like if they're having a good time, it's a good way to be social with their friends as well. If they're playing with friends, and I mean, Fortnite is more a social platform than a game in a lot of ways. And I think
Yeah.
the violence in it is fairly tame. I wouldn't say it's educational or anything really. I guess it could teach cooperation, which is something a lot of people struggle with if you're actually trying to win.
Yeah, but I don't think like Fortnite is as conducive to that creative thinking as like a lot of other games are.
Yeah, definitely Nintendo games are more conducive
Yeah.
to creativity overall. Like,
And I would
guys
even
pick
argue that
Zelda.
like some like Sony first party game, like I would say like I know Uncharted's mostly like a movie thriller, but like the puzzles in there could be conducive to creative thinking. Obviously not as much as Nintendo games, but like
It can also get you interested in history as well, although, Uncharted's take on history is extremely fantastical.
yeah.
But I would be lying if I said I wasn't playing Uncharted and like wanted, I've looked up, like, is Nathan Drake actually spouting nonsense here? Like, is any of
Yeah.
this legitimate? And,
I remember playing games like Medieval Total War and being like, "Ooh, history. What were the Normans?" And then-
there are definitely a lot of, those 3X games. I mean, those 3X games are just good for critical
4X,
thinking as well.
4X, right?
yeah, not
4X,
3X.
sorry. 4X, 3X is nasty. 4X is
4X is the game. 3X is the
the part of the video store you shouldn't go in. But 4X games, they could get you interested in history, but there's also just like, I mean, that's just a good brain exercise. Like, if you think playing chess is good for you, then you can't argue that playing these 4X games isn't good for you,
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't think there's any sort of you can't really argue that 4X games don't exercise your brain. Like,
Yeah.
that's just not true. Like, I think, more standard video game fare is what most, like, I think parents are worried about. But I think an interesting thing to consider, is if I imagine all three of us, because we were growing up right when video games, we saw the benefit of seeing video games go from niche to mainstream.
Yes.
Growing up, so like I imagine I certainly had parents on my case about video games growing up. I imagine you guys did too.
Actually, not really. I mean, video games were usually the thing my parents would threaten to take away if I was like not doing my homework or something.
Yeah.
But
Well, I should say, let me retract that. I shouldn't say on my case. But they were constantly saying like, hey, you shouldn't play as many video games. Like, I think what they were most afraid of was the addictive quality. And granted, that is something to be aware of. Like you hear.
Oh yeah, as a MapleStory player, I can tell you, games can be very addictive. And you should watch out for that. But
and that's a very valid argument for like, okay, video games might not be so good for you, but like at the same time, like. I think that's your duty as a parent to be like, okay, you get like an hour of game time a day so your child doesn't become addicted. And it's just that sort of nice, like.
Yeah, and that's something I never really had. My parents never restricted the amount of games I would play in a day.
Mine didn't either, but they would sometimes make me feel bad for playing so many games.
Yeah, my parents would heavily imply that I was playing too much sometimes.
Yeah, mine still blame video games for all my problems.
Yeah.
Like,
and I definitely know, like I know people that in as late as high school, like they would play video games instead of doing their schoolwork, and that's not healthy. Like
I did my schoolwork and then got frustrated and then went to video games.
Yeah, exactly. Same.
You just got nothing done because all you play were video games, and then I'd look at my Steam history and I'd have like an hour for like a week.
Yeah.
It's too many video games.
I do think that the unhealthiest and most destructive kind of video game is this might be controversial, but I was going to say is the MMO.
Yeah, I knew that was where you were going, and like I agree and I disagree, because I definitely I was an only child, and like outside of school I didn't hang out with a lot of kids like when I was younger. It just didn't really happen. Like around, in high school, I definitely grew out of that, and I started hanging out with more diverse groups and everything, and kind of grew out of it. But in middle school, I got a lot of social practice, as it were, playing MMOs. But typically, I was playing MMOs that were like not necessarily a younger target audience, but I wasn't playing World of Warcraft, Like, I was playing Nexon games like MapleStory and Mabinogi. MapleStory for sure was targeted at a younger audience. I would say Mabinogi was targeted a little bit older than MapleStory.
Yeah.
But, I made some friends that I still talk to, through that. And
see, that's really cool. Like, I've made friends through games, like online, but I don't think I've ever had any, I guess real friends. Like, no one I still talk to today. Like, they were just friends while we were playing the game. And I feel like I kind of missed out on that aspect of, potential community through video games.
Now, of course, I will stress that, and this was hard. This was something my parents didn't really do, but it would have been very difficult for them to do it because they weren't particularly video game literate. And, this is something, if you're a newer parent, you might want to strive to do. I'm saying that not really knowing who our audience is, I guess, but
it doesn't show me their ages, unfortunately.
No, but this never happened to me because I was always super careful. I didn't give away my name or any personal information about me, but you really need to make sure that your child understands that, because I don't know anybody that had a predator come to their house or anything. But I do know several people that have been lied to and duped by people over the internet. People not who they said they were. People
never meet people alone on the internet. Just don't.
No. Well, I know people that I know someone who dated someone in World of Warcraft who ended up being married and 30 while this guy was 14. And that's pretty messed up. That's not cool.
Yeah, I think if I ever have kids, I will try to keep them if they get into gaming, I will try to keep them in offline gaming as long as possible, because I think online it just opens the floodgates for all sorts of stuff. But I guess an argument could be made that maybe you're sheltering the kid a little bit to the quote unquote real world. But
I think it's anything
a fine
else.
Line. Yeah.
You should try to take part in your kid's life. I know people that play MMOs with their parents and have that's what their family does together, and that's super cool. They get together and do raids and WoW, and yeah, that's about as safe as it could be. I feel
you gotta find like you can use video games as like a parent to bond with your kids. If your kid likes playing Fortnite, play Fortnite with your kid.
Yeah. That's a really huge point. Also, sidetrack, I think it's hilarious that we're giving parenting advice.
Welcome to the
okay, so we are not parents, right?
Yeah, we're
but
not.
do you know how happy it would have made me as a kid?
Yes, that's the point I was getting to.
Yeah,
so like,
it would have made me
one of my fondest memories as a 3-year-old. Maybe it was 3 or 4, right? When Super Mario 64 first came out. That was my first video game. I've said that before many times on the show. But my fondest memory of that is that was the only video game both me, my mom, and my dad all played individually. They never played video games again after that, but they did play Mario 64. And I remember there was a specific part on a specific level that only my mom did, because I guess me and my dad sucked too much at it. So we'd always hand the controller to my mom, and she'd like sneak past the piranha plant or whatever.
That's so fun.
And then hand the controller back. And like I remember like when I fought Bowser at the end, the rainbow colored Bowser with the 3 lives.
Yeah.
It was like we were getting ready to go to an event or like a party or something. And then I was too scared to fight him. So I handed the controller to my dad, and my dad like lost all of Mario's lives except for the last life. And then I was like, okay, I'll do it. So then I beat Bowser on my first try. And I remember that being such a fulfilling experience because my parents were so involved. And that's part of the reason, yes, Mario 64 was my first game, but like that's another reason it's so special, because that was the first and last time they cared about like this hobby that I care about so much.
Yeah, and I mean, my dad played games with me when I was real little. I still remember playing Super Mario World with him, and that was like super cool and all. But like, and my dad never like totally lost interest. He was just a busy guy. But my mom was never real interested in games or anything. Until I was an adult. I actually remember like when Breath of the Wild came out, I was playing it in my living room, and my mom actually like commented on some stuff, and I was really confused because she'd never done that before, like in my life.
Well, that's I think that can also be attributed to video games just becoming so much bigger and mainstream, and like when someone looks at a game now, they're like, like I think so. My parents were over at my new house like last weekend, and I was playing God of War, and my dad just stared at the TV. He was just like, he couldn't believe that this is what video games are now. I was just like, yeah, like we've come a long way very quickly.
We grew up in that period where games weren't exactly like mainstream yet, but they were on the verge of being. So you were still a nerd if you played video games.
Yes. Yeah.
And then the very next generation, suddenly everyone was playing video games.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think PS3 360 in a large part, at least in the US, I think the 360 made video gaming like at least like amongst your teenage friends mainstream.
Everybody but me had a 360.
Oh,
I didn't have a 360 until like real late, and then I still have fond memories of playing like Halo co-op with my awful stepdad.
I had a Wii. I had a Wii and a PS3.
And, well, actually, the Wii has to have a huge gets huge credit for that as well. Everyone had a Wii.
Oh like, yeah. Even my parents were also interested in the Wii.
Yes. And so were mine. I remember playing like Wii Sports with like the whole family and stuff like that. So like,
I remember being a kid and my dad asked me if I wanted a DS, and the way he described it was a Game Boy with 2 screens, and I was just like, that sounds dumb. No.
And now was the standard until they got rid of it.
Yeah.
We're back to 1 screen now.
One big screen.
I didn't want a DS until I saw my friend Christian had Super Mario 64 on one, and I was like, no way.
No.
Yeah.
They're putting the big game on the small thing?
Yeah, exactly. I think the first time you see that is mind-blowing. Like, I had seen Super Mario World on the Game Boy Advance, but,
It makes me feel old when I see a game that I grew up with suddenly appear on like on a 3DS. I'm like, oh.
I mean, like, you can play Skyrim on a Switch, which is like, if you had shown, like, what was it? How old was I in 2011? Like 16, 15, something like that. If you had shown me then Skyrim running on a portable, I would think this is like black magic, like It's insane.
Yeah, I knew people that had laptops that could run it at the time. So
that's not the same, and you know it.
It's not the same.
Not the same. A glorified mobile phone is literally running Skyrim right now.
Yeah.
But I do think, like, back on the topic of what made video games mainstream, like, yes, the Wii 360, PS3 generation kind of put it over the barrier, but I think the PS4, Xbox One generation, it just exploded, right? Like, especially with the rise of, like, online gaming, like, having that be, like, ubiquitous, like, it's just, you know, like, gaming is a normal thing you talk about now.
And as much as I hate Fortnite helped.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean,
Fortnite helped. I mean, like,
I don't hate Fortnite. You know, my problems with Fortnite are there's an errant signal video that largely outlines my issues with Fortnite, and I don't have a problem with the gameplay or the culture or anything around it. My only problem with Fortnite is that it's literally they're not selling you the game, they're selling you self-expression. Like, you have to pay to be able to do emotes and stuff.
Yeah, that's
kind of scummy to sell kids the ability to express themselves. You're in kind of nasty waters there. But on the other hand, it's a big social party that's cool. And
I mean, like, Drake played Fortnite publicly, you know, like, and that
I mean, there were concerts. They showed, I mean, movie trailers have come out in Fortnite. They showed,
which
I think,
weird.
Inception.
Tenet, you know, like Christopher Nolan's new movie. They premiered the new trailer for that in Fortnite. And when I saw that, like my first thought was just like, I'm too old for this. This is not targeted at me anymore.
See, the thing is, that's not. This is a tangent, but that's not targeted at you.
I know.
That trailer, the people who play Fortnite were not going to look up that trailer, but because it was in Fortnite, they probably watched it.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. And everybody else that wanted to watch it is just like, this is dumb. I'll wait until it's on YouTube.
Yeah, it really made me feel old for some reason when I saw that.
Epic basically has this like batch of millions of teenagers that they can just sell to advertisers right now, and that's
powerful.
That is very powerful
and a little scummy, whatever. And I don't know how scummy it is because these kids, you know, how likely they'd even care about Tenet, you know. But
I mean, I don't know. When I was a teenager, I was super into, like, especially after The Dark Knight, I was like all over Christopher Nolan. I was like,
really,
whatever this guy makes, I'm gonna watch.
I was not, but
I wasn't over.
I wasn't really movie literate until I was 20. So,
but I think,
yeah.
Sorry, I was just going to say, like, I think an important topic we brought up is that of games literacy. I think, you know, this new generation of parents is going to be way, way more games literate than obviously our parents were, and I think that's going to be important for like future kids growing up. I think we'll have a lot, I guess, an easier time enjoying games as, you know, part of growing up than we did.
Yeah, especially since now gaming is accepted as normal.
Yeah, it's weird, right? Like, I don't know, like, history well enough. Like, were movies first regarded as like some weird niche thing?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Yeah. So was like rock music. Rock music was like, oh, it's the devil's music, and now it's just ubiquitous.
Yeah.
Anything new is gonna have that period where it's like it's the devil's work or whatever.
It's the devil's work,
and then people are just gonna get used to it.
Yeah, I think I think we're in a good place now. Like, in terms of, like, I don't really think parents make that argument too much anymore. Like, okay, I'll let my kids watch TV or movies or whatever, but no video games. You know, like, that's not really a prevalent sentiment anymore. And I feel like it was kind of when we were growing up, but
yeah, I definitely knew. I definitely knew kids who were allowed to watch TV as long as they want, but could only play like half an hour of video games or something, you know.
Yeah.
And in my mind, this is like the problem is the screen, you know. Like, in my mind, if you're gonna if you're gonna have your kids staring at a screen, I'd almost rather them be playing a video game than watching a movie because
more neurons are firing.
Yeah, you're like that. That's what makes me so mad looking back. People like, oh, video games are gonna melt your brain. That was like a huge, like, I remember my mom telling me that at some point when I was a kid, and I think she was like joking, but you know, this coming from people who watch television like constantly, you know, like,
yeah,
it's video games are not melting your brain. It may look like that because your kid probably can't answer a question while they're playing a video game because it actually takes your attention.
Demand focus, you can't just watch, you can have TV on in the background while you're doing something else. You can't really game well, I can't say that.
Yeah,
my friends game in the background, but
this is also coming back from me streaming a lot. People it's easy to talk over a video game while you're playing it. No, it's not. It's not. Super hard, especially when it's a game that requires a lot of my neurons firing at once.
Yeah, no, I definitely I've been playing a lot of Rocket League again here recently, and me and my buds will all be in the middle of a story or something because Rocket League is kind of, it's paced. Sometimes things are kind of chill. You're just waiting for an opportunity. At least at our level, at the higher skills, it's probably not like that. But at the skill level we play at, I can be telling a story, and then all of a sudden I see an opportunity for a goal, and the Discord goes dead silent
Yeah, that's how I am in Valorant.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm going to admit I've been playing Elite this entire time, but Elite requires me to just smooth my brain over.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, me and my friend Whitney have been playing No Man's Sky and just hanging out on Discord a lot, and that's purely social. No Man's Sky, there's nothing to it.
But I will argue that even if you're multitasking with gaming, right? At the base level, you're still doing more than if you were watching TV, right? Because you're interacting with it.
Yeah, No Man's Sky, I'm at least I'm flying around space. I'm thinking, I'm do these trade routes matter? Do these enemies matter? It's just not intense rapid fire stuff that demands 100% of my attention. Yeah. Same with Sea of Thieves. Sea of Thieves is the only reason a lot of my friends know anything about sailing. It's not the most accurate presentation probably, but I'm a Boy Scout. I'll admit it. I have the small sailing merit badge, small boat sailing, and Sea of Thieves it's not wrong.
Yeah,
Sea of Thieves is also not a small boat.
No, it's not. But the stuff we learned about aiming the sails and stuff.
It'll be very vital information if you ever decide to form a pirate crew with your friends.
It will be. Obviously, that's not the, but people would say that taking small boat sailing in Boy Scouts was good for me. And when am I going to go, when is my life going to rely on me knowing how to sail a small boat?
Especially here.
You joke, but you never know when skills can come up,
Oh, yeah.
I don't know. I think it's always good to have a wide array of random skills.
Yeah, I agree. And that is something. Skills are not really taught in gaming a whole lot beyond the occasional programming, the occasional, it's critical thinking is a skill, I guess, but it's more of a soft skill than a hard skill.
Yeah, I think, obviously those skills can be taught in gaming, but the primary thing that games teach you is creative thinking.
I think if we're wrapping up the segment, I think we should probably just say a couple of games that we think, we've said them throughout probably, but just say a couple of games that we think are really good for that. And I'll say Breath of the Wild.
Yeah. That was the first game that came to my mind as well. And I think a large part of it has to do with, of course, the emergent gameplay, which is not easy from a creative standpoint to make. That's why not a lot of games have that level of emergence.
Yeah.
It's just not easy to make. It takes real talent to do something like that. But, I will stand behind, this. I mentioned Dark Souls earlier in the video, and I think that teaches a very different skill of, tenacity in the face of frustration. Obviously, as a software engineer, I get frustrated a lot,
oh, yeah.
It's part of the job. You're just why isn't this working? This worked 2 minutes ago. And Dark Souls, a lot of those same feelings are evoked in Dark Souls. And I've learned through Dark Souls that okay, sometimes I tackle the problem in a different way. Sometimes I just have to walk away, take a little break and come back and everything makes sense. Same thing applies, in Dark Souls combat and programming. Those principles apply to both. So I think that's an important skill to have.
Mike, would you want to say some of maybe the softer 4X games people could get into?
Softer 4Xs? I'd say the historical Total War games, well, not exactly truly historical, they're good, and they have enough information in them that you can kind of glands basic history off of it.
I think Civ has enough to get you interested, although Civ I wouldn't say Civ teaches you anything.
Well, I mean, Civ is like a giant melting pot, right? It literally has some of everything. So if anything intrigues you, you can always like look up more on it yourself. But it like presents you on a surface level, like virtually everything.
Actually, I don't want to use acronyms while we're here. So Civilization 6.
Yeah. We've turned into a parenting advice podcast. Oh dear.
I would not call this parenting advice. None of us are parents or have even read a parenting book.
I think it's just more trying to dispel the notion that video games are bad for kids.
Yeah, and I think we're qualified to say that, being kids who grew up on games and are decent.
Yeah.
Although and it is something we read about a lot.
Yeah, we might just be shouting into the void. Might be an old way of thinking, but I think it's important to bring up because at least we had experienced some of that growing up.
Right.
Yeah.
Minecraft, obviously. Did we say Minecraft yet?
We've mentioned Minecraft, yeah.
Roblox, Minecraft.
And I think puzzle games to an extent too. Like, I know these aren't as popular, but like games like The Witness, I think, really test your critical thinking skills and help you think in new ways.
Yeah. Even something like Tetris, it's good for the brain. Satisfactory, definitely. Satisfactory is basically civil engineering the game,
Yeah.
That teaches you hard skills for civil engineering, essentially.
Civil and industrial.
If you like Satisfactory and you don't know what you want to do with your life, look at civil and industrial engineering, because that's what it is, basically.
Yeah, same with Factorio.
Mm-hmm. Any of those factory building games. Same with Minecraft mods, like Tekkit.
In that, then maybe you should check out industrial engineering.
Yeah.
But I was gonna say, like, with games, like even like small sections of games, like just generic combat in some senses can be can bolster creative thinking, right? Because like, what is combat? In a lot of games, like you have a few attacks, you have techniques you can use, and you have enemies with certain patterns. And you have to figure out what works and what doesn't work. Like you have a tool set being, your controller, and you have to, and your tools being like your attacks, and you have to figure out what works. And I know that's a little bit of a stretch, but like it really does sort of apply. Like you're given something and you have to solve something.
And there's also just the general confidence boost that comes from doing something that looks difficult, Like
absolutely, yeah.
I used to babysit my ex's niece and nephew, and I had them playing Super Mario Odyssey, which is not a particularly difficult game or anything, but they were 4 and 7, I believe, at the time. And the 7-year-old girl, Bella, was controlling Mario while Max was controlling Cappy. And every time we got to a boss fight or something, Bella would try to hand the controllers off to me, and I'd always tell her she had to try first. And like half the time she'd beat it just fine and be like super excited.
Yeah.
And
yeah, that's an entire aspect we never even touched on. It definitely is a confidence booster.
Yeah. Yeah. And we didn't touch on that because I feel like it's maybe even obvious to us, but
yeah.
And that goes right back to Dark Souls. Dark Souls is designed around that feeling of power you get when you finally overcome something difficult.
Yeah, like that's why like so many of my friends are afraid of the Souls series. They're like, yeah, I don't want to play something like that. But I'm like, it's really not about difficulty. It's about learning and overcoming your frustrations and like just overcoming immense challenge. But
you have to be in the mood for it.
That doesn't necessarily equate to difficulty, though. You just have to learn it, I think. Maybe I'm not articulating it correctly, but like I really don't feel like the Souls games are about difficulty.
But yeah, I think that's pretty much what I have to say about the topic.
Yeah, I think we've made our point.
Yeah,
because it is hard to just list off the games that are good for you and the games that aren't. You kind of have to, and there's no easy way to research that either. I don't feel like, well, I'm not a parent, so there might be lists, there might be parenting communities that.
But I think that isn't a substitute for the experience, right? We have so much experience that like I feel like if we ever have kids, we'll know exactly, the kind of games they should play.
Right.
Yeah, so like I'm sure those lists exist out there, but I don't think they're a substitute for the experience that like people like us have.
Yeah, but not everybody has the experience we have. A lot of people got into gaming, gaming is still fairly recently mainstream, so a lot of people don't have the same 20 years of experience that we have.
Oh gosh, we're old.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay, so that's that. What have you guys been playing?
Anybody want to start us off, or
I'm going to start off. Speaking of like critical thinking and what was it, divergent thinking, I've been playing Hard Space Shipbreaker, which requires a lot of that, or else things explode.
You're really on a space kick, aren't you?
Oh, I've been wanting to talk about this game for a little bit, but
Mike, you've been on a space kick for like 10 years now, haven't you?
Yeah, something like that. No, Hard Space is literally just, it's less space and more of creative destruction. Because you're presented with a ship and you have one goal, salvage it. And there's a lot of things that can go wrong. If you cut the reactor will explode. If you're not fast enough with the reactor will melt down and explode.
Oh, this sounds really fun to me.
If you don't depressurize the atmosphere by going through the airlock and activating the atmosphere regulators, chances are if you cut the cockpit, the glass will shoot off like a shotgun. And it's actually kind of funny. It will explode. If you got a fuel line, guess what? It's gonna explode.
So is this game basically about like managing disasters in space?
Not so much. It's very zen and when you're salvaging, but there's just a lot that can go terribly, terribly wrong, and that's what makes it interesting.
I feel like
one wrong cut and the entire ship, your entire salvage could go wrong.
Similar to actual space exploration, millions of things can go wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if you know what you're doing, it's really easy to manage around it. It's like, I knew what I was doing, so I'd go in, depressurize the ship, cut out the bottom after the reactor, and just throw it out the bottom to the barge below me. Once you figure it out, you get that satisfaction of just seeing everything cleanly slide out instead of having to slice everything up like a mad sushi chef. It's just visceral, and I love it.
What was it called again?
Hard Space Shipbreaker.
Hard Space Shipbreaker?
Yes.
Very
and
nice.
It's in early access right now, but it's also backed up by Focus as the publisher. So
$25 for an early access. Ooh, that's steep.
It's worth.
Is it?
There's a good bit of content there. And even then, they're still relatively updating, and it's actually published.
Oh, does it have 6 degrees of freedom when you move around?
Yes, 6 degrees of freedom.
Oh, you're selling me.
What does that mean?
It means you can rotate as well as going forward, backward, up, and down.
Yeah, you
can roll, is what I mean.
Oh, I see what you mean. Okay, I gotcha.
Yeah.
It has a lot of cool movement techniques as well.
I bet. I mean, 6 degrees of freedom, that opens up a lot.
You can just grapple reel to something and then kind of Spider-Man grab it, because there's a grab function as well.
That's I feel like that might be a requirement for space games for immersion purposes.
The 6 degrees of freedom. I mean, you don't have it at all, and I guess you have it in space a little bit in No Man's Sky. But I feel like it's what No Man's Sky is really missing. Is zero gravity, 6 degrees of freedom movement.
Sorry.
What was that?
Sorry, I was just gonna say what popped into my head when you mentioned 6 degrees of freedom is actually the Call of Duty Infinite Warfare campaign. Yeah. Because a large chunk of it takes place in space, and it does have the 6 degrees of freedom, you can rotate and stuff, and I don't know, I thought that was really cool.
Now, 6 degrees of freedom is one of those things that not many people can deal with because it makes them nauseous, but once you figure out how to move in it, it's great to play with.
It's also just more difficult, you're adding more, basically.
Yeah, you have more directions that things can go wrong in.
Yeah, because I know a lot of people. The Outer Wilds has a lot of it's not the whole game where you're moving like that, but a lot of it you are, and people who aren't accustomed to it just have a ton of trouble.
No, but Hard Space is not a bad game, and I would recommend buying it or even waiting.
Yeah.
Because it's getting updates very gradually. Right now, there are 2 ships, but it kind of spoon feeds you the trainer ship, and then you actually get to the proper version of the trainer ship, and then you go to the big ships. It spoon feeds you enough. Right now, I'm just about done with the game, and it's open shift mode, and I'm about 6 hours in. Like, I've almost done all the content, and I'll probably have like 10, 12 hours when it's all said and done. So it's not exactly big right now. There's not a lot to it.
That's why I don't know. I'm not really big on early access games because like I like playing finished games, but the definition of a finished game becomes more and more nebulous every day, I think.
Yeah. Normally I don't even buy into early access games, but I saw it was actually Focus publishing it, and Focus is generally a good publisher. So I trust them not to abandon the game since they have actual backing.
Yeah.
That's a problem with early access now, as it sometimes will just run out of money and abandon the game.
True, yeah. And I don't know. I feel like you don't really see that with like big publishers, but with like mid-tier and smaller publishers, that's definitely a possibility.
Yeah.
So I guess I can go next as to what I've been playing. Nothing too exciting for me. Nothing new. I'm still on that Last of Us Part 2 kick. Like
really, you're still playing that?
I'm almost done with my second playthrough.
It's been 2 weeks since our last recording.
Yeah, I've been playing on Survivor Plus, which is the hardest difficulty, and let me tell you, that really ratchets the tension up even more. Because Last of Us Part 2 is already a very tense game, but like the tension is just through the roof because you find like 2 bullets for an encounter with like 12 enemies, and you just have to make it work somehow, you know. And you die in like 1 shot, maybe 2 if you're lucky. Like,
wow,
very
if you're lucky.
Yeah, if it's very difficult for me at least. I know like stealth game pros probably find it easy still, but like for me it's quite a challenge. But yeah, I'm replaying it and it's still just in complete awe of the story. I think it's a masterclass in storytelling, and I think I think the gameplay as well is just almost just as good as the storytelling. Like it's first in class gameplay, I think. So yeah, I've said lots of nice things about The Last of Us Part 2, so I'm not going to keep going on that, but like still playing it. I've also started up a new save on God of War, and I think my main mentality was like, at this point, God of War and The Last of Us Part 2 were my 2 favorite PS4 games, like no contest. And I think what I'm doing is just sort of playing these 2 games again before the generation ends. I think just doing that to sort of put a cap on this generation for me, I think it's a fun experience. So playing God of War and The Last of Us Part 2, that's what I'm doing.
Finish Persona 5 before the generation ends.
Yeah, well, you have time, right? Because like Persona 6 isn't going to be a thing for a while, I think.
Yeah.
All right, Connor?
So my game kind of goes along with our theme this week of education through divergent thinking. I've been playing The Escapists 2. It's I really I really want to like it, and I think that there's a lot there to like. But like the soft pitch of this game is that like you live in a prison and your job is to come up with creative ways to escape. But like it doesn't feel super creative a lot of the time. Like pretty much every prison I've done so far, you have the option to dig a hole. And, like, there's always some place that the guards just don't go to that you can start your hole. And, like, as long as you don't do something really dumb, nothing's going to come up. And it's just easy. They'll never find your hole. And it's, like, it's a matter of time, but it doesn't even take that long to build the tools you need to dig. And you can dig through, like, absurd, like, it's not like you can only dig through 1 tile or something. Like, you can dig down into the ground and dig as far as you need to get out. You can dig through the walls of the prison if that's what you have to do. I don't know. It just feels like every prison's kind of the same to me so far. I've played, I think, 4 of them.
And, I think you mentioned, like, you can just sort of dig out of all of them. I think if there's, like, one solution that just works all the time, it sort of defeats the purpose of these kind of games.
But there are also, like, custom solutions that are supposedly more fun for each prison. But universally so far, those have been even easier. Like, it's been like, you know, one of them, you had to, like, repair a motorcycle and steal it to ride out of the prison. It was, like, I don't know. One of them was, like, a specific spot you had to dig out. One of them was you had to go find a disguise. And that one was one where you literally had to do 0 setup to do it. You could just go find, and that's not fair for me to criticize too much. That was the first prison. But there's a disguise you can just find, and it's at a totally reasonable place for it to be. You put it on and you walk out of the prison. Like, I don't know. I'm just, and it has like a competitive multiplayer where you like race to get out first, and that might be fun. And it also has like cooperative multiplayer where like, I guess there's more chance for hijinks, you know. There's more chance for one of you to slip up and get caught doing something you're not supposed to, and then they're going to start searching for like stuff in the prison. But so far, it's just kind of boring to me. I don't know. And this is a game that got reviewed well, so I feel like I'm the one missing something here. That's why I keep going back to it, because it's so close to something I really would like, you know?
So you said you finished like 4 prisons. Is that like 4 levels? Like,
essentially, yeah. And I've finished some of those prisons more than once to see a couple different of the escape routes and stuff. Yeah, a prison is essentially a level. Like, you get dropped into a prison, and you're in that prison until you break out of it. You know, it can be days, it can be hours, you never know. Depends on how much setup work you have to do. You have to do stuff like steal from other inmates, or do jobs for other inmates, or do jobs for the prison to try to earn money. And you can, like, trade stuff around and try to collect resources you need to build a makeshift shovel or something to dig out. Or
so how many prisons are there? Because I feel like if you've only done 4 and there's like 30, maybe you're still like too early to see any of the.
12.
Okay.
And then there's a bunch of DLC, and there's also if you bought it on Steam, there's workshop prisons, but I got it for free on the Epic Game Store, and I believe it is still free on the Epic Game Store right now if you guys want to check it out. And I'd be down to try the multiplayer to see if you guys see something I'm missing that makes this game fun, because I feel like the fun's there, I just haven't found it. I really think it's there.
Yeah, I don't know. And sometimes that can be tricky, right? Because, like, you feel like it's there, but also at the same time, you feel at a certain point you're like, am I going to waste more time on this, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And I'm at the point, like, if any of my friends want to play it, I will happily join them. Because I think it would be fun as just a goof-off social game. But I don't know. And I almost feel like it'd be, like, all it would take is it being harder for it to be more fun. And so I feel like maybe if I get into some of the later prisons, that would do it. But I don't think the entire first half of the game should be this boring.
Yeah, and I think that sort of leads into a separate discussion we might have one day of, like, how long do you give a game before, like, you decide that you're not about it, you know?
Oh, yeah, and that happened to me in Xenoblade Chronicles 2, where people were like, I was playing it, and I was, like, not having a ton of fun, and this game reviewed super well, and I looked it up, and they're like, oh, yeah, it doesn't really get started until about the 25-hour mark, and I was like, are you insane?
Yeah. No, like, I heard something similar about, like, what was it? I think Final Fantasy 13.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's the most extreme example. They're like, oh, you know, the game really doesn't start until like 40 hours in. I'm just like, what is wrong with you?
The sad part is, and this is shameful for me to admit, but Xenoblade Chronicles 2 was a gift, so I did end up playing it to that point, and it does get kind of good. The voice acting never gets better. The voice acting is an abomination in that game, but
you should probably play it in Japanese, considering it's a Japanese game.
Nah, well, it's kind of funny though.
Yeah,
they all have Irish accents.
Yeah, I remember watching reviews for Xenoblade 2, and I was just like, what is this dub?
The dub in Dragon Quest 11, or what's the newest Dragon Quest? 11?
11.
The dub in that had really funny accents too. Like, not funny accents, but like accents that felt really out of place.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Like, usually with Japanese games, I always opt to play in Japanese with subtitles on. And that's how I'm probably going to be playing Ghost of Tsushima tomorrow. But I did hear that the subtitle, the lips only match with the English dialogue, which is really aggravating to me.
Oh, really? I wouldn't even notice, I don't think.
Really? I think that sort of thing's pretty noticeable, right? If you play in Japanese and, like, the character
my eyes would be on the subtitles.
That's fair. Yeah.
So, I watched. I like to. Well, this is gonna make me sound disgusting, but I like to eat while I watch anime. I'm always eating like a snack or something, and so I get real annoyed if subs are my only option because I have to like split my attention between the visuals, the subtitles, and my food.
Yeah. You have to pay attention to your food? Hold on.
I have to not miss my mouth at least. If I don't want to spill my bowl.
That's fair.
Holding. I mean, it's not a big attention split, but I don't know. I still am watching a subtitled anime right now, but
yeah, and before we wrap up, I do want to bring up another reason that I'm replaying The Last of Us Part 2 and God of War. And this might be slightly braggy, but I want to talk about it. I got a brand new TV, and it is mind-numbingly awesome. So I just want to play. I've been like glued to my TV for the past like week and a half, and just
to get another OLED.
Yeah. So I've just been consuming as much media as I can on that thing. So
how big is it?
65.
Okay, yeah, that's what mine is, except it's not an OLED.
Yeah, like I don't know, like I wanted to get all upgraded for next gen, so.
Yeah, I'm looking at getting a new monitor.
It still doesn't justify what I did. Did you see that Samsung Odyssey G9 or whatever?
No.
It's like an obscene it's like a 45-inch curved monitor, and it's like the most beastly looking monitor I've ever seen. It's crazy.
Yeah, I'm in the market for a new monitor, but I'm probably not going to get something beastly. I just want something probably 1440p, 144 hertz. Yeah. Nothing crazy. I'd like to have a FreeSync because that stuff's cool, but
yeah, I think that's pretty much. I feel like you need to have G-Sync or FreeSync if you're going for a monitor these days.
Yeah, I want to go FreeSync because I don't want to be locked into NVIDIA right now because AMD seems to be making a hard comeback.
We'll see. I feel like NVIDIA is just so on point that
NVIDIA's slipped up in a lot of places, in my opinion, recently, and given AMD room to rise. But we'll see. Maybe that could be a discussion for another episode.
Yeah. I think that'll do it for us this week. Thank you guys for listening. You can follow us at @PodcastGameTalk on Twitter. Please like, rate, and review us on any podcast service you may use. And please click the link in the description of this podcast to join our Discord and talk with us there. Thank you, Connor and Mike.
Yep. See you guys next week.
Yeah, see you guys next week. Yeah.
Yep. And we'll catch you later. Yeah.